A Democratic slush fund revealed. A lot of people are asking questions about this individual here, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, the individual who just lost something like $16 billion in personal net worth overnight, something like $30 billion may have evaporated. Millions of consumers have been screwed out of their money. And people are putting two and two together, and they're asking whether or not this is all going to the Democrats. This individual here the name is Balaji Srinivasin. We've talked about him here on this channel before. Brilliant individual. He's the author of a book called The Network State. He was big into Bitcoin very early on. He was the chief technical officer at Coinbase for a long period of time, helped launch that company. Somebody I think is extremely, extremely credible. And this is what he posted on Twitter. Balaji said, "The net result of FTX is that billions of dollars was stolen from crypto investors, people like you and me, to give to Democrat-aligned politicians, nonprofits, and journalists." Journalists too, which is why a lot of this stuff is being buried. All of them circling up and protecting SBF. Now, this is why he says there may be no prosecution. So he put together a pretty amazing Twitter thread on this, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But there's a lot more background that we need to check on this first, because you can see there's just a lot of material here that are going to allow us to add some meat around the bone. So who is this guy, SBF? There's this video. You may have seen this. I'm not going to play the full thing because it's so cringeworthy. But SBF was promoted as somebody who gave a lot of money for a bunch of resources. And take a look at these causes that SBF was thrilled about.
Last year, this 29-year-old guy donated $50 million. Next year, he's planning to donate $500 million a year.
Wow.
And next decade, he will probably give away more than $10 billion. And he is funding everything you can think of. Global warming.
Oh, great.
It's one of the biggest problems that we have to tackle together as a world.
COVID-19 preparedness.
We have to be ready for the next pandemic.
Neglected tropical diseases.
More than 1 billion people suffer from them. We have to eliminate these diseases.
And of course, animal welfare.
Animals deserve to live just like we do. It's also why I'm vegan.
And they're delicious. That's why we eat them. So he is a very interesting character, as you can see, this little personality thing he's got going on. Extremely young, had evidently made billions of dollars kind of overnight. And all of that was to be given back to democratic causes like global warming, COVID, animal rights, and strange new diseases that probably require 35 new vaccinations in order to survive them. So very interesting questions about this guy. And he just kind of popped up out of nowhere. And I've used FTX. I was a customer. I've used FTX. And it is pretty amazing that all of this has come crashing down. Listen to this guy when he is explaining to Bloomberg, right, during one of these big events, SBF communicating to other finance connoisseurs that he's very responsible and he doesn't do things, like dip into consumer funds and use them for his own purposes.
That's the place where it's sort of like most obvious that we should act, because if we don't, they might be slightly underwater. And there are serious questions about, like, do they have to take drastic corporate action? But for like a relatively small, sort of like potential incineration of money, we can like resolve that problem and make them able to like continue operating and like carry on and not like cause contagion or customers losing assets or anything like that.
What?
So that sort of like is the best case. Well, okay, the best case is that I have tons of extra capital, but then why are they calling us? So okay, of the calls we might get, the best case is when they have about zero left, right? And they're like, look, we need a buffer here so that we can like definitely pay salaries without dipping into customer funds, like, and we're like, that makes sense, right? And in those cases, like what we would tend to do is like, okay,
because otherwise they would.
Well, depending on the company, right? Otherwise they
depending on the
maybe
company
they would declare bankruptcy, or maybe they would dip into customer, whatever. Maybe
they would dip into other people's funds. Depends on the company. The reputable companies would never do something like that. But those shady companies, they might dip into customer funds, which is why they've got to call FTX and we'll help bail them out. Little did we all know that they were dipping into their own customer funds and they weren't keeping good track or any liquidity of any of the money that was supposedly supposed to be there for their consumers. This is SBF's girlfriend or something. Very interesting situation happening there out of the Bahamas. The CEO of Alameda is explaining risk to two young gentlemen, and she doesn't even really need math to make all of this stuff work. It's just magic.
Yeah, absolutely could pull it off without my math degree. Use very little math. Use a lot of elementary school math. Being comfortable with risk is very important. We tend not to have things like stop losses. I think those aren't necessarily a great risk management tool. I'm trying to think of a good example of a trade where I've lost a ton of money.
We can think of a couple.
Well, I don't know. I probably don't want to go into specifics too much.
Yeah, good call on that one. Yeah, good call. Yeah, you don't want to go into any specifics on the risk situation that you're involved in because you lost a dozen billion dollars like that. Shocking. Now, okay, so who is this person? Now, you can see this clip here of Sam Bankman-Fried, and there's a pretty interesting Twitter thread that we're going to dive into that detail who this guy's parents are and where all of this sort of emanated from. And let me pull this up. This came from Genco Stocks, at Genco Stocks. He posted this. He said, did that weird island over there ever get shut down or did it just move? He says, there's some really weird stuff going on with FTX. He says, hold on a minute. FTX was founded in 2019 and somehow it just exploded into the biggest name in crypto. How did that happen? Sponsored by the MLB, sponsored by basketball. Sam heavily lobbying members of Congress. His face was all over the place as the next Warren Buffett. And I know we started a crypto channel here and we, at some point, we sort of reversed, unwound some of that stuff because it was just too much. I was too busy to continue on with it. But really, this was kind of a shocking thing. This guy popped up all over the place and this mug was all over the internet. But the question from Genco is, how did he elevate to such a position so quickly? Let's look at his parents. His dad has written about and made a career off getting rid of the cash economy and helping the government find tax evasion. Weird that his son was the biggest name in crypto. Very curious. Some more here. You see photographs of Barbara Fried. You see some biographies here. We zoom in. It says biography for Joseph Bankman. He's a leading scholar in the field of tax laws. Bankman is the author of 2 widely used casebooks on the subject. He is writing on tax policy, including the role of tax in the structure of Silicon Valley startups and how the government might control the use of tax shelters. He's testified in front of Congress and other legislative bodies on tax compliance and problems posed by the cash economy. That's dad. Mom works in distributive justice in the areas of tax policy, property theory, and political theory. And both of these people are professors at Stanford. Professors of law at Stanford in California. So obviously a very smart family. I would imagine that kid is probably freakishly smart as well, but very curious that they're all sort of in this interesting little cabal of nefarious activities. The CEO of FTX is the woman that we just saw previously. She is somebody who has high connections in various places. Interesting partnerships. You can see this individual, Jago Capital, said that the CEO of Goldman Sachs and David Solomon met with SBF FTX to help FTX get regulatory approval. All right, so Goldman Sachs here. Goldman Sachs, David Solomon, Goldman Sachs has met with Sam Bankman-Fried, a cryptocurrency exchange. 2 major strands evolved out of their discussion. One where Goldman Sachs would help FTX get regulatory approval. Well, that's weird. Why would Goldman Sachs want to help basically a competitor get regulatory approval? And you see the pictures of people who are meeting to discuss these situations. Now, it turns out that after all of these people from Stanford and California were colluding and sort of propping this kid up, All the money was going in, and he turns out to be one of the largest donors to Democrats, second only to George Soros. Here's the list. SBF gave the second largest donation to Joe Biden's presidential campaign in 2020. Here you go. Here are the numbers. Top level mega donors in this cycle. Republicans had some big ones. They had Ken Griffin, Richard Uihlein. But Sam Bankman, he gave $37 million over to the Democrats. George Soros gave $128 million. Big, big numbers going to the Democrats. And where'd all that money come from? A lot of people have a lot of questions about that. 1 month after the war in Ukraine started, Zelensky partnered with FTX. We'll get to that story in a minute. And the entire saga about him being a poor little innocent individual, if you read the rest of that thread from @Genco Stocks, he's going to talk about some interesting symbology and the logos that they used and how those logos might match up with some other problematic things that the FBI has talked about historically. So check out that thread from @Genco Stocks on Twitter if you want to dive down a very fun rabbit hole, because boy, oh boy, there is some good stuff there. Now, we are going to go into a very useful Twitter thread from Balaji Srinivasin. He's going to explain to us exactly why this is so important. He's really demanding that we get to the bottom of all of this funding. And so we'll get there in one quick second. But first, my friends, if you're sick and tired of this crypto stuff, if you're like, man, this stuff is so confusing, you may not think it's a good asset. You might think about gold. If you have an IRA, a 401k, or a savings account, you know things are scary out there. You can lose your entire crypto stack overnight. The Biden administration, crypto hackers are all over the place. National debt's a disaster. Inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982. It's only a matter of time before the whole house of cards comes crashing down, just like what happened at FTX. If you've got retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement savings with gold and silver, not crypto, before it's too late. Go to robertlikesgold.com. They'll give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you sign up for a qualifying account. Check out robertlikesgold.com. Support our friends at Goldco. They are an A+ rated business with the Better Business Bureau, and we're grateful for your support of our sponsors. Okay, so now let's check in with Sam Bankman-Fried, because a lot of people are concerned about his donations. When SBF was asked about his contributions to Democrats, he got a little bit nervous. He's kind of squirmy in his chair, doesn't want to answer this question.
You think every money you spend in politics should be disclosed publicly? Are you comfortable with that?
I think that I think what I would say is, if there was a norm where every dollar that everyone donated in politics was to be disclosed publicly, I would have a lot of sympathy for that. I think I might support it. I haven't thought carefully about it enough to know. But
well, it sounds like what you're saying is maybe there's some donations that you have made that you wouldn't make if you knew they were going to be immediately public.
So I think I don't generally think about it that way. I generally think of it as like these are the right the right contributions to make.
Shaking in his chair, probably Adderalled out or something more serious. Who knows? A lot of speculation about that's what that is. But other people say that that's just nervous because he realizes what's going on. He realizes he's being called out on all of these donations that are going to all sorts of Democrats. And he doesn't have the liquidity. He doesn't have the funds to support the balance that is due. And let me turn myself off. You can see him sort of shaking a little bit from this side view while he's talking about this.
I would have a lot of sympathy for that. I think I might support it. I haven't thought carefully about it enough to know. But
well, it sounds like what you're saying is maybe there's some donations that you have made that you wouldn't make if you knew they were going to be immediately public.
So I think I don't generally think about it that way. I generally think of it as like these are the right the right contributions to make.
They're the right contributions to make as long as nobody knows who is making them and exactly how much is being made and where they are going. The whole thing is just kind of a shocker. Now, the media, large part, has been sort of pushing this aside. The New York Times had a puff piece about this guy. They didn't mention, theft of billions of dollars. They didn't mention fraud or forgery or theft or money laundering. They didn't mention any of the Democratic connections there at the New York Times. There's really been big attempts to cover this whole thing up because they don't want to give the money back. And Balaji had an amazing thread on this. Once again, Balaji Srinivasin at Balaji S, an amazing, amazing follow. I've listened to basically every single interview he's ever given. He gave an 8-hour interview with Lex Friedman, if you want to listen to that podcast, but he's a brilliant dude. Highly, highly credible. And I wouldn't even say highly partisan, right? He's somebody who is sort of crypto first rather than a political partisan person. Okay. Balaji says, the net result of FTX is that billions of dollars was stolen from crypto investors, everyday people, and given to Democrat-aligned politicians, nonprofits, and journalists to cover up their stink. This is why there may be no prosecution. Balaji says, why is SBF so protected? Why is everyone from the SEC to the New York Times, the Security Exchange Commission, to the New York Times running interference for this guy? He was basically Soros Jr., just with stolen customer money, and evidently bought off the entire media, the nonprofit, political, and regulatory establishment. He links over to this article, which was archived. It says, the pandemic of SBF. The world of philanthropy and politics is fighting a 5-alarm fire right now. Billions of dollars that were theoretically going to flow to lobbying operations, super PACs, and scientists just went poof. Sam Bankman-Fried, his global crypto exchange, now declares bankruptcy. He was a little hyperbolic, but he said that he was going to spend $1 billion in 2024, which is basically the amount of money that entire campaigns spend. He was dispensing hundreds of millions of dollars a year on his philanthropic giving, okay, who seemed to hire the entire industry of donor advisors. It's all gone up in flames. Jaw-dropping amount of money. He exploded from Democratic big money into the world of Democratic big money. He's the son of Stanford professors. His mother founded a hot donor network called Mind the Gap. His dad taught tax law. They hired aggressively for their influence. They got a place in the Bahamas. They shut down everything else. They wanted to focus on pandemic prevention. But everything came crashing down. It emerged that they had lent out half of its customer deposits. So it's like if you went to your bank to go withdraw $100, Sam, who runs the bank, says, sorry, I've already lent that out. $10 billion, all was extended out. Extinction event happens. Everything comes crashing down. The conduct was very bad, but you can see exactly, sort of how bad this goes or where this goes. Balaji tells us more. He says, the author, the guy who just wrote that piece, is born a rich journo. So he knows the milieu of Bankman-Fried's. And the overall picture you get is of rats scurrying around now that the money has been cut off, very much not wanting any crypto investors like you and me to claw back those stolen funds. They say, let's be clear, the optics would look awful if SBF is giving away money to his whiz-kid political projects while millions of customers lose their deposits. All that money went over to the Democrats. The stage is set for an absolutely insane zero-sum match. On one side, 1 million crypto investors were robbed of $10 billion by SBF. $10 billion. 1 million people. Could you imagine being that guy? Sitting at home going, oh gosh. Or if he has to go walk down the street to pick up a gallon of milk. Gosh. On the other side, a network of dark money Democrats who will fight to keep as much of those stolen funds as possible. Do you think that $10 billion is just going to rematerialize and they're going to say, oh yeah, Sam gave us 100 million. Sam gave us 30 million. Here, we'll just give it back over to you. Of course not. So they're all going to go dark and they're all going to circle the wagons to protect him. Balaji says, the bankruptcy case may play out on social media. Crypto investors seeking to get back FTX funds may hire lawyers. People like this guy, Irving Picard, who clawed back 75 cents on the dollar for the Madoff victims. Who would they claw it back from, though? He asks. Where would they get this money from? Oh, yeah. They've got to go to the groups that SBF funded. All the politicians, all the non-political groups, all of the journos. that $10 billion is going to come out of their pockets. Two lawyers, Irving Picard, David Sheehan, they've recovered 75 cents on the dollar from the Bernie Madoff situation. But the fundamental question is from Balaji, when did SBF start stealing from customers and how much did he steal? This can only be accomplished through a forensic accounting. Now, the headlines that you're seeing posted all over the place is $37 million, okay? Because that's like what he reported on an FEC form. But that understates it. Balaji knows crypto inside and out. He lives it. He wrote a book called The Network State. The FTX Foundation alone was $190 million. $190 million from a foundation. Don't believe that $37 million. How much was stolen? The FTX contagion now appears to be spreading to some nonprofits, academics, institutes, think tanks, any people allied themselves with or received money from the FTX Foundation, which was funded by profits from Bankman's crypto exchange. The foundation claims, the one foundation, and this guy has a whole list of companies, $190 million. Woo! That's some good money. It's unclear how much of that money came from the foundation's main giving vehicle, the Future Fund. They committed $160 million to nonprofits and researchers. Some of the money was redistributed to philanthropic causes. Now, Balaji says, all right, we need a list of all the donations he made, potentially with stolen money. Here's at least 4 of them. $69 million in political donations, mostly to Democrats, some to Republicans via his subordinate. And his subordinate did. I think there was about $29 million that his subordinate gave to Republicans. Okay, so like they're not stupid, right? You pay for everybody on both sides. If you really want to immunize yourself, you own everybody, right? Buy the Republican senators just like you buy the Democratic senators. Get them all in line. So he's got the Democrats, he's got the Republicans, $190 million to a foundation, $128 million to a PAC. And look, an undisclosed amount. No idea how much money went. Crypto billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried burst into the election cycle, giving the second largest donor to Democratic causes. $39.9 million, including $35 million to 3 different political action committees. Deputies at FTX gave nearly $29 million more. Woo! All of it stolen. They didn't earn that money. It's all customer money. $69 million spent by Bankman-Fried and his deputies in the midterms would have done little to plug his reported financial hole. Okay, so they didn't even have the money, but they were giving to Democrats like lunatics. And remember, that's like a Senate seat right there. $69 million bucks. That's a Senate seat. Mark Kelly, how much did he pay? $73 million in Arizona, and he got his seat. Blake Masters only got $9 million, right? He didn't get his seat. So you just do the math. That's a full Senate seat that they donated. Bankman told Forbes last month, "In the end, I care about policy more than politics," he said. "My giving has been bipartisan, and my goal is to help support great policymakers." Right. People who allow him to get away with continual theft. He supported Republicans through his $2 million contribution, they said in another post. FTX contagion here also appears to be spreading. The foundation, the FTX Foundation, $190 million bucks. Again, don't know how much of that came from different entities because it's all now up in the air. But they had interest for philanthropic causes, artificial intelligence, space governance, biohazards, climate change, all under this fake banner of effective altruism. It's all for the good of the planet. It's all for the good of you. You'll be better if you just listen to me. All of these wacko saviors out there who think that they can save the planet. Now, here's another one. In general, Silicon Valley mega donors seem to be concerned with the cost effectiveness. The theory behind the PAC was a major player in 2020. Oh my gosh. The theory behind the FF PAC was that one of the most cost-effective interventions in campaigns was extremely late TV advertising. And the PAC was a major player in 2020. They spent $128 million on the presidential election. Woo! $128 million bucks. That's a lot of money. And in this final post, this organization called GAP, Guarding Against Pandemics, another 501c3 where a bunch of money was funneled, $30 billion. Gabe spent hundreds of thousands of ads, hired both in-house and external lobbyists to try to convince Congress to apportion $30 billion for the anti-pandemic cause as part of Build Back Better. They wanted $30 billion to be appropriated to them from the government. Gap later started a PAC that raised another $85,000 from small donors who were capped. Gap, a dark money group, hasn't disclosed how much money it raised or how much money SBF donated, although it says it has multiple donors. So we have a limitless, an uncapped amount of money donated to political causes, grifted from FTX. Stolen, right? Not just a grift, a thievery. Balaji says all kinds of obfuscation games have been played here. Donations made with possibly stolen funds. Numbers that are publicly known may just be the tip of the iceberg. Where did the $10 billion go? How much of it was stolen and when was it stolen? He's got a $14 million mystery super PAC. A lot of problems. Now, the crypto clawback is where this becomes a bigger problem for them, because what happens if that $10 billion comes back? Anyone who has money that was taken, Balaji recommends learning the following terms: clawback, lookback, fraudulent conveyance, unjust enrichment, avoidable preference. He says, ask a lawyer. You may be able to recover your funds if SBF donated your money to one of these organizations. So if you got taken advantage of, you may contact a local lawyer and talk to them about your situation, and they may be able to do something for you. But this is why the establishment has been so muted. It's because 1 million crypto investors might claw back billions of dollars from the Democrats, from politicians, and from the media. And so they don't want you to get that money back because they want it for themselves and their Democratic colleagues, all of whom are now a lot richer at the expense of many, many innocent retail investors. Now, there was a story about how this money might have been being cleaned up by the Democrats. And CoinDesk is a very interesting crypto website, and they talked about the following some time ago. In March 2022, CoinDesk reported that FTX, which is now defunct and bankrupt, they were converting crypto contributions to Ukraine's war effort into fiat for deposit at the National Bank of Ukraine. Very interesting story. Back in March, the Ukrainian government launched a new crypto donations website on Monday, streamlining its multi-million-dollar effort to turn bitcoins into bullets, bandages, and other material. Very clever. Aid for Ukraine, which has the backing of crypto exchange FTX, a staking platform, will route donated crypto to the National Bank of Ukraine. Oh, very curious. Ukraine's crypto-savvy Ministry of Digital Transformation is also involved. The country's collective effort have already raised some $48 million in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, according to the website. Other estimates total amounts closer to 100 million. But totals vary with the market swings. The website deepens an unprecedented tie-up between public and private sector in crypto. FTX is converting donations into fiat at the National Bank of Ukraine. A press release described it as a first. Central Bank is using donations to fund humanitarian aid programs, as well as the Ukraine Armed Forces, according to the website. The people will continue to fight for their freedom. Crypto assets proved extremely helpful in the facilitation of funding flows to Ukrainian citizens and soldiers, as well as raising awareness. Right. Oh, he hinted at an upcoming NFT collection, also that's going to give a boost to the crypto fundraising effort. All there in Ukraine. Woo! All right. So that's just outstanding. So not only are they gobbling up your money, they're also apparently shipping it over to Ukraine. Now, we don't see much, we don't have many more details on this other than just speculation, but this is how some people are saying it could theoretically work, right? The US government beats us all with a hammer and tells us we have to support Ukraine no matter what, for as long as it takes, and don't ask any questions about it. If you do, you're an insurrectionist of America because you love Putin. We've all heard that phrase many times. You've probably heard it 3 times today. And here, that sort of encourages us to say, sure, how much more money do you need? 40 billion? No problem. Another 40? No problem. What kind of weapons do you need? Ad nauseum. The U.S. government gives the money over to Ukraine. Ukraine then is converting that through FTX, whatever relationship they've got there. And then FTX is donating hundreds of millions of dollars over to the Democrats. It's sick, man. And it's our money, right? So you can see, nobody else knows where this guy got all of this money. Okay, where'd all this money come from? Where did it come from? He popped up out of nowhere. Probably from the U.S. taxpayer. Investors, we all know that, right? All of your private money was a part of that, but also maybe U.S. government money. Pretty shocking. Now, Sam, previously, Congress was all over this. Our very smart Congress people, they actually brought him in. They had questions for him, and apparently they couldn't figure much out. Here is SBF in front of Congress talking about how transparent he runs his business. And unfortunately, our very astute, very, very capable Congress people couldn't see quite through the facade.
Last thing that I'll say is if you look at what precipitated some of the 2008 financial crisis, you saw a number of bilateral, bespoke, non-reported transactions happening between financial counterparties, which then got repackaged and re-leveraged again and again and again, such that no one knew how much risk was in that system until it all fell apart. If you compare that to what happens on FTX or other major cryptocurrency venues today, there's complete transparency about the full open interest. There's complete transparency about the positions that are held. There's a robust, consistent risk framework applied, and we're excited to work with the CFTC on our U.S. licensed and regulated venue to bring a lot of this.
Glad we got all those regulations and licenses in place. Glad that our very smart, capable Congress people were sitting there asking him questions. And they did something about this before he took $10 billion away from many Americans. And I guess that's just our government at work. So pretty amazing. Now, the big question, of course, is will there be an investigation into any of this? Evidently, there is something that is bubbling up. We had this. Did I link this up here? Yeah, we have some evidence that there is investigations taking place. This came from the Wall Street Journal. SEC DOJ investigating FTX, the crypto platform that is no longer. The SEC and the DOJ apparently have started an investigation. Somebody familiar with the matter said staff at the two law enforcement agencies were in close contact on Wednesday. Justice Department prosecutes criminal violations like fraud, while the SEC enforces civil investor protection laws. But a spokesman for the DOJ and the SEC declined to comment. Of course, FTX did not comment either. The SEC was investigating for months. They were focused on FTX.us, which lists dozens of crypto tokens. Officials believe some of the assets might constitute securities, and so they said, we're going to continue our job as a cop on the beat. SEC Chairman Gary Gensler said in an event, the runway is getting shorter and shorter for some of these intermediaries, he said. Other people are demanding that there are, prosecutions that start, but it's been pretty quiet. I haven't seen a real formal statement from the DOJ about what they're doing. It's all been mostly quiet, but a story popped up that was very fun. They're actually more interested, it seems like, in prosecuting one of their competitors. So this story was written by Colin Wilhelm, and he's asking questions about Binance, which is actually a competitor to FTX. This narrative you can see is bubbling up. The Block was reporting on this story, and it's reporting from Congress people. It says Binance's role. Okay, it's like a competitor. It's like literally a competing exchange. Binance's role in the collapse of FTX has sent reverberations around the crypto markets, and it's come under scrutiny, according to a senior House Republican. What? He says, this is serious. I think this is a major event, from Representative Patrick McHenry, Republican from North Carolina. He told The Block while acknowledging that Binance helped facilitate the meltdown. And of course, that is true because Binance, in fact, did have some of the coin, and they started to sell their coin, which theoretically, instigated the liquidation, the mass withdrawal from FTX, which caused the collapse. But the point of me sharing this with you is that they're not even these Republicans, this North Carolina Republican, likely the next chairman of the House Financial Services, referred to a widely circulated meme on the internet saying that Binance CEO played a role in FTX's sharp decline. So why are they investigating a competitor rather than the actual entity itself? This first step is a bipartisan call for a hearing. We're going to prioritize this in the next Congress. Maxine Waters says it's a bipartisan call. We're going to work together. Does this add any urgency? She says, well, maybe. So, I mean, that's what our Congress people are doing in response. And they'll pass some additional legislation, and we will, of course, see where this goes. If any charges do come about, we will cover it. We've got a class action lawsuit that we're going to get to next. But wherever it is you're watching this, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video before you get out of here. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one.